We never talked about China. I never talked to you about her privately. I never talked about her on the show. What was your relationship with her like? Because you did a lot of work with China.
Um, it ended up being very good, especially post wrestling when I would see her at conventions and signings. And usually it's the WWE animal that makes everybody a different person. And when she was pushed very, very hard, and this is during the right to censor when we were burning her Playboy and doing all that stuff, and she went to wrestle Ivory at WrestleMania, and they had a match that I feel like could have been a little bit more competitive because Ivory was a great heel. I mean, she Ivory was considered to be the new leader of the right to censor, which I was all for because a female telling a bunch of big guys what to do and a female lecturing the audience, it could have been so like ahead of its time. I lobbied for that. So shout out to Ivory for being probably one of the greatest heels ever, not just as women, but a great heel. But the China thing at that time, and I didn't know what personal stuff she was going through with Hunter and Stephanie and all that, because that was kind of all during that time. She was kind of hard to deal with. She was hard to work with. And I think Jericho had said that in an interview recently. And I hold no personal grudge against that. She was just very hard to work with. My only wish was that after I got to know Joni at conventions, even through Vince Russo, the person she is outside of WWE, I wish I could have just asked her at least once, "Hey, are you okay?" Because maybe there would have been some kind of conversation or bonding, or I would have saw her a different way and she would have opened up a little bit more. And maybe if enough people had done that and checked on her or supported her, that she might still be here today. So I feel bad about that. I feel bad about it. And I learned a great lesson, Mike, that if somebody's acting a certain way, just don't say that person's an asshole, that person's a jerk, that person's this and that. I look at it a little bit more like what are they going through? And I really do go out of my way a lot of times just to say, hey, are you okay? Everything good? And usually 9 times out of 10, they'll open up or they'll be like, oh, someone cares. So
Right.
she was rough to work with at the time, but now that I have perspective, I'm like, she was going through hell, man. And then she ended up losing her job in the end anyway. So it's like, I don't know, man. I wish I had the perspective and I wish I had the maturity to see it for what it is instead of we all seem to take it personally backstage because we're all insecure and we're all head on a swivel backstage in the wrestling locker room. I wish I could have been the person I am today back then for her and other talents. Does that make sense?
No, totally. Totally. You mentioned Chris Jericho. You worked with Chris, you teamed with Chris. What are your thoughts on Chris Jericho?
He was always a lot of fun to work on Heat, and he liked being on Heat because there is a lot of pressure being on TV and pay per view, like the Raw, SmackDown, and pay per view stuff. And Heat gave us an opportunity to actually work longer matches, be more creatively fluid with things, and try stuff out. And Chris and me had great chemistry in the ring. As a person or whatever, I don't really know Chris. I mean, that sounds weird. I don't know a whole lot about him. I didn't really interact with him a whole lot on a personal level. I never got to know him. I don't even know anything about the guy outside of the ring. And he probably doesn't know anything about me. So that's fine. But on a professional level, very casual, cordial, and in the ring, never hurt me. Everything was good and we had fun.
What do you think of him still working today?
Well, I think that like injuries start to pile up. I think age starts to get us all. But there's always that thing where I think if you're on TV, you definitely need to be at the top of your game from a aesthetic viewpoint or aesthetic point, the work and everything like that. Chris is he's a necessity to be in that locker room. You need a veteran presence. You need things going on. And I have no idea, but I see that it seems to be a very chaotic, dramatic locker room. Just my impression from the outside looking in. And it's somebody like Chris with all his experience and being everywhere. I feel like isn't utilized enough to bring a consistent, steady calm to or direction to the company. So if Chris could do anything like that, I wish he would. But then again, he put all his time in, so he deserves to have that status of Chris will have his own little universe here and do his things. And maybe Tony's asked him, I would need for you to be my second in command, like Daniel Bryan is. And Chris was
Right.
like, no, I'm good with I'll teach the guys with him. I'm just speculating. I'll teach the guys that I'm interacting with, but man, I don't have the energy for the whole thing you're asking me to do. Once again, pure speculation.